The Elder Brain, later empowered by the Nether Stones to become a Nether Brain, plays a pivotal role in the game Baldur's Gate 3, inasmuch as it is the defining plot point of the game, being the false deity, otherwise known as the Absolute, that leads people astray for the sake of the Dead Three. But how much do we really know about the nature and being of a typical illithid Elder Brain, and its role within Mind Flayer communities and society at large? Today, we are going to explore the lore and secrets of the Elder Brain, so get yourself some cerebral brine tea, kick back, and enjoy. To begin with, there is the question of what an Elder Brain is in the context of Mind Flayer society. To put it simply, it is the centerpiece of every and any illithid community. In terms of its biology, the Elder Brain is the final stage of the Mind Flayer life cycle. But it is not actually a separate species, and is ultimately derived from other illithids. But despite this relationship, the path to get there is actually not a particularly straightforward process. An Elder Brain is composed of the dead brains of many Mind Flayers, which in turn serve the function of psionic glue, so to speak, which allows it to collect and synergize its power. But an Elder Brain has one key component that it requires in order to fully come online and become recognizable as an Elder Brain, in order that it may become the leader of Mind Flayer society, and that requirement is a special kind of illithid. Illithids are hermaphroditic, and each Mind Flayer can spawn a massive larvae 2 or 3 times within its lifetime. Under normal circumstances, when a creature undergoes seromorphosis, a normal Mind Flayer is produced on the basis of a normal tadpole. But sometimes, better put, rarely, a tadpole undergoes a strange alteration to its physiology, becoming different and more potent. The exact nature of this change, or its origin, is not known, but suffice to say that when such a tadpole infects a humanoid, the end product is not a conventional illithid, but rather something more potent, special type of illithid, superior to others of its kind, called an ulitharid. The term ulitharid can roughly be translated to enlightened one, or noble devourer, from the undercommon tongue, and the birth of one is an incredibly rare thing. Roughly 1 out of 100 tadpoles in the Mind Flayer conclave will evolve into an illitharid, signifying their rarity. They are stronger, larger, more intelligent, and more powerful than the average Mind Flayer. Perhaps, what is worse, even more malicious. One of the obvious physical differences between standard illithids and ulitharids is the presence of 6 tentacles instead of the normal 4, with the extra 2 being extraordinarily long compared to the other 4, and of course they possess all of the powers of standard Mind Flayers, except such abilities are much more potent, meaning their mind blasts hit harder, for example, in addition to being smarter. And for all of these reasons, the more normal illithids have a reverence for ulitharids that borders on near worship. Ulitharids are more independent than average Mind Flayers, and can easily resist the control and influence of the Elder Brain. They work grudgingly within Mind Flayer conclaves, but their independent streak and greater power frequently leads to friction and conflicts of interest between the Elder Brain and the respective illitharid, which in turn can lead to division within the illithid community. And in a sense, this is a good thing, as the illitharid's independence is the key to the propagation of the illithid race. Eventually, due to conflicting interests, an illitharid will strike out on its own, and will leave its community of birth and take several normal illithid followers with it, which is important, because its brain forms the basis of creating new Elder Brains. When the illitharid decides to die, its brain is placed into a new brain pool, combined with the brains of average Mind Flayers, where it becomes a larval Elder Brain. I say decide, because it must voluntarily decide to have its brain removed, because the process will not work if it dies of old age. Seemingly, only the brain of an illitharid will do, as this process will not work with the brain of a normal Mind Flayer. In time, the merged brains with the illitharid brain at its core evolve into a proper Elder Brain, capable of directing and commanding its Mind Flayer subordinates, and expanding its goals, and more broadly those of Mind Flayer kind. The Elder Brain is the centerpiece of illithid society, and it's doubtful if mind flayers could even exist and prosper without the direction they receive from the Elder Brain, because, despite their lawful evil nature, are nonetheless selfish, self-centered creatures that will look out for their own interests above those of the collective if this selfishness is not checked. The Elder Brain thus serves as the glue to any mind flayer community, allowing the community to cooperate and work towards common goals beyond the interests of any one mind flayer, although one could conversely argue that in such a case, the individual interests of mind flayers are then subordinated to the singular interests of the Elder Brain, and the Elder Brain is no less selfish a being than individual mind flayers are. That said, the Elder Brain generally looks after the collective interests of the mind flayer race, in an effort to promote said race's goal, domination and enslavement of other races, and the restoration of the now long-gone illithid empire. To this end, the Elder Brain possesses tremendous psionic powers that far exceed those of any individual illithid, or even an individual illitherate, as the Elder Brain is composed of hundreds of brains of deceased mind flayers, with the illitherate's brain at its core, meaning its psionic charms, domination, and mind blast are unlike anything a normal mind flayer could produce, and beings subjected to its powers will almost always find it incredibly difficult to resist, far more so than any conventional mind flayer. Despite this, the Elder Brain is physically weak and relies on others, most frequently humanoids enslaved by mind flayers, to move it about, as it is literally just a massive brain with tentacles. If in theory one could resist the powers of an Elder Brain, it would be relatively easy to destroy it, as its only defense, save for its psionic powers, is its tentacles, which are powerful, but by no means unavoidable or unbeatable. For this reason, the Elder Brain's mind flayer underlings keep constant watch and guard the Elder Brain with the utmost of care. It is said that as a result of its configuration, a mind flayer Elder Brain possesses godlike intellect and memory, serving as the de facto leader of any illithid community. Of the brains of many deceased illithids, is mind flayer society's greatest repository of knowledge, whether historical, technological, or otherwise, since it can draw upon the collective knowledge and power of all the brains that went into its creation, and can increase its knowledge with each new brain added. To a mind flayer, the Elder Brain is the final and ultimate goal in its life cycle, as when mind flayers near the end of their lives, they sacrifice their brains to give them to the Elder Brain, thus further strengthening its power and intellect. But the average mind flayer does not believe it to be a sacrifice, because the average mind flayer also believes that its individual personality and consciousness is preserved, and it merely becomes one of many after having been absorbed into the Elder Brain. But this is not actually true. Possibly the most closely guarded secret of all of illithid society, and specifically of an Elder Brain, is the fact that whilst the knowledge and experience of an individual mind flayer survives and becomes part of the Elder Brain, its personality and consciousness does not, and is forever lost. Yes, total annihilation. Virtually no one knows this, save for the most esoteric of scholars, and the Elder Brain itself. For one could only imagine the calamity that would ensue were mind flayers en masse to become aware of this deception, falsely believing themselves to persist into the future in some form of grand collective melding, when in reality they simply sacrifice themselves for the good of the Elder Brain. Were illithids not so profoundly evil and selfish, then one could imagine such a sacrifice to be worthwhile, say for the greater good. But mind flayers are profoundly evil and selfish, and one could easily hypothesize a rebellion within mind flayer society were the secret to become common knowledge. Now beyond this, there is an important question of the extent to which an Elder Brain actually controls the mind flayers under its purview. And Baldur's Gate 3 specifically suggests that the Elder Brain exerts absolute control, no pun intended there, by the way, even before the Elder Brain becomes a Nether Brain, but most sources available suggest otherwise. Setting aside the secret of personal annihilation of individual mind flayers who join the Elder Brain's position is much more akin to that of a leader, whom followers, the illithids, starkly admire, as they view it as the final and most perfect evolution of their species. Coercion, though possible, therefore rarely takes place in any real sense, since the reverence and admiration for the elder brain suffices for illithids in order that they might tend to it and ensure its safety. And with respect to commands, these are usually obeyed on principle rather than by way of force. Despite their decidedly evil nature, the near religious reverence mind flayers have for the elder brain circumvents the use of coercion and allows for there to be a relatively stable and reliable hierarchy, with the elder brain at the top. As for the elder brain itself, a singular entity born out of the collective fusion of many other entities, it generally regards itself as the apex of all of existence. Singular mind flayers might be familiar to it, but they are subordinate, and all other beings are either slaves or enemies to be destroyed. This is simply a reflection of the general supremacist attitude of illithids towards non-illithids. However, in the case of the elder brain, it is even more extreme. Thanks for watching. Before I go, I'd like to invite you to my Discord, and as always, thank you for tuning in. If you like my content, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, and you can hit the bell icon to be notified of my videos. It'll be much appreciated, as it helps out the channel a great deal, and I'll check you out next time. Take care.